The lawyer's hand froze midair as the office door swung open, and a man filled the frame. Dust rose from his coat, trail-worn and stained, and his eyes swept the room with the kind of cold assessment that made Tessa Bennett's spine straighten. She kept her hand flat on the deed her uncle had left her, the ink still fresh, the weight of it heavier than paper had any right to be. The stranger's gaze landed on her, held for one breath too long, then shifted to the lawyer. Mr. Holbrook, who'd been mid-sentence about property lines and water rights, went pale. The man stepped inside. 3 days of trail grime shadowed his jaw. His voice came low and even. "I'm looking for Bennett, the owner of Red Mesa Ranch." Tessa stood slowly, the green fabric of her dress catching the afternoon light slanting through the window. Her uncle died 2 weeks ago. "I'm his heir, Dr. Tessa Bennett." Something flickered across his face, quick as lightning, gone just as fast. He removed his hat, revealing sun-faded brown hair a touch longer than fashion allowed. His features were weathered, but handsome, in a way that spoke of hard weather and harder choices. "The name's Roscoe Carver. I'm the trail boss your uncle hired 3 months back. We had a contract for a cattle drive north. Payment on delivery." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Miss Bennett, your uncle did sign a contract with Mr. Carver. The drive was scheduled to leave next week. 500 head to the railroad terminus at Cheyenne. The payment was substantial." Tessa's pulse kicked. She'd spent the last 2 weeks learning that her uncle's ranch was mortgaged to the point of collapse, that the railroad company had been making aggressive buyout offers, that the town of Bitter Ridge viewed her as an outsider with no business running cattle. And now this, a contract she knew nothing about, with a man whose eyes held secrets she couldn't read. "I'll need to see the paperwork," she said. Carver's jaw tightened fractionally. "It's at the ranch, in your uncle's office. He knew I was coming. We had an understanding. Understanding or not, my uncle's gone. That makes it my decision now." The air between them felt charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Carver's gaze dropped to the deed under her hand, then back to her face. "That drive is the only way you'll keep that ranch. The railroad's been buying up every property between here and the territorial line. You miss this window, you'll have no leverage and no income. They'll take Red Mesa for a fraction of what it's worth." She hated that he was right, hated more that he seemed to know it. "How much did my uncle owe you?" "Half up front. The rest on delivery. He paid the advance 2 months ago. I've got 30 men waiting and a herd that won't stay fat forever. We leave in 6 days, or we don't leave at all." Tessa glanced at Holbrook, who nodded reluctantly. "The contract is binding, Miss Bennett. If you refuse to honor it, Mr. Carver could sue for damages. And if I don't have the second half of his payment?" She kept her voice level, but her stomach twisted. She'd found ledgers in her uncle's desk that showed debts she was still cataloging. Loans from men whose names made the town go quiet. Carver stepped closer, boot heels solid on the plank floor. "Then you ride north with us and earn it. Your uncle said you knew medicine. Trail drives need a doctor. You work the drive, I'll take my payment from the sale, and you keep the rest. Enough to clear your debts and tell the railroad to go to hell." She met his eyes. They were a shade of gray-blue that reminded her of storm clouds over open plains. There was something underneath the bluntness, a flicker of something that might have been respect or might have been calculation. She'd been burned before by men who wore honesty like a mask. "I'll need to see the books, the contract, everything." "Fair enough. Carver settled his hat back on. "I'll be at Red Mesa at first light. You can decide then. But decide fast, Doctor. The calendar doesn't care about your doubts." He turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind him with a finality that felt like a thrown gauntlet. Holbrook exhaled slowly. "Miss Bennett, I must advise caution. Cattle drives are dangerous undertakings, and Mr. Carver's reputation is, well, complicated." "Complicated how?" "He's known as a man who finishes what he starts. But there are rumors he left his last employer under, shall we say, unclear circumstances. A disputed payment. Some say he took money that wasn't his. Others say he was owed and took what he earned. The truth is murky." Tessa's hand curled into a fist on the deed. She'd come to Bitter Ridge expecting a quiet inheritance and a chance to rebuild the life her former fiancé had shattered back in St. Louis. Instead, she'd found debts, danger, and a man whose presence felt like a match struck in a room full of gunpowder. The next morning, Tessa stood on the porch of Red Mesa Ranch as Roscoe Carver rode in with the sun barely clearing the eastern hills. He brought 3 extra horses and a saddlebag that looked heavy enough to carry answers or trouble. Possibly both. He dismounted in one smooth motion and tied the reins to the porch rail. "Morning, Doctor." She gestured to the door. "The office is this way." Inside, the ranch house still smelled faintly of her uncle's pipe tobacco and leather. Carver moved through the dim hallway like he knew the layout, which made her teeth set on edge. He'd been here before, had meetings she'd never known about. The thought prickled. In the office, he pulled a folder from his coat and set it on the desk. Contracts all there. Payment schedule, delivery terms, route north through the high passes. Your uncle and I planned it down to the day. Tessa opened the folder and scanned the pages. The terms were clear, the numbers staggering. If the drive succeeded, she'd clear her debts and have enough left to hire hands, repair fences, maybe even expand the herd next spring. If it failed, she'd lose everything. "Why did my uncle trust you?" Carver leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "Because I delivered for him twice before. Smaller drives, but clean. No losses, no trouble. He knew I don't take shortcuts, and I don't abandon a job halfway." "And the rumors about your last employer?" His expression didn't change, but something went cold in his eyes. "Man hired me to move cattle, then tried to cut my pay in half when we reached the railhead. Said the market had dropped and it wasn't his fault. I took what I was owed and left. He called it theft. I call it wages earned." Tessa studied him. His face was weathered, lines around his eyes from squinting into too many sunrises. But there was no guile in the way he met her gaze. Either he was telling the truth, or he was the best liar she'd ever met. "If I agree to this, I need to know you're not planning to disappear with my cattle the moment we're out of sight of Bitter Ridge." A faint, humorless smile touched his mouth. "If I wanted to steal from you, Doctor, I'd have done it already. Your uncle trusted me because I gave him my word. I'm giving you the same. You'll get every head to Cheyenne, or I'll answer for the ones we lose." She wanted to believe him. Hated that she wanted to. Trust had cost her everything once before. Her fiancé had looked her in the eye and promised her a future, then left her with debts and a ruined reputation the day before their wedding. She'd fled St. Louis with nothing but her medical training and the faint hope that distance could erase shame. Carver straightened. I need your answer by sundown. The men are provisioned and ready. We're burning daylight. I'll ride with you. But I keep control of the sale at the other end. I sign the transfer. I collect the payment. And I decide what happens to Red Mesa after. Agreed. He extended his hand. She took it. His palm was calloused, his grip firm, but not crushing. For a moment, neither of them moved, and Tessa felt the weight of the choice settle over her like a coat she couldn't shrug off. Then he released her hand and stepped back. Be ready at dawn. Bring what you can carry and leave the rest. It's a hard month ahead, Doctor. No place for second thoughts. Dawn came cold and clear. The ranch yard churned with movement as 30 men saddled horses, checked gear, and moved the herd into formation. Tessa stood beside the mare Carver had assigned her, a steady roan with kind eyes, and watched the controlled chaos unfold. Carver appeared at her elbow, his own mount already saddled. You ever worked cattle before? I've stitched up enough ranch hands to know what happens when things go wrong. Then you know to stay clear of the flanks when we're moving, and never ride ahead of the led steers. They spook easy, and they don't forgive mistakes. Understood. He studied her for a moment, and she caught something unexpected in his expression. Concern, maybe, or the faint edge of doubt. You don't have to do this. I can hire another hand to cover the medical work. I'm going. She swung into the saddle, her skirts adjusted for riding, her medical bag secured behind the cantle. This is my ranch, my future. I'm not staying behind. A flicker of approval crossed his face, brief but unmistakable. Then stay close to the wagon until you get your trail legs. And if I give an order, follow it. Out there, hesitation kills. The drive moved north like a living river. 500 head of cattle flowing across the high desert with the rhythm of drumbeats and dust. Tessa learned to read the herd's moods. The way the led steers tested the pace, the way the flankers kept the stragglers moving. Carver rode point most days, his silhouette sharp against the horizon, and she found herself watching him more than she meant to. He was good at what he did. The men respected him, followed his orders without question, and when trouble came, he was the first to meet it. On the fourth day, a steer broke loose during a river crossing and dragged a young hand underwater. Tessa was off her horse and into the current before she thought, her dress dragging heavy, her hands finding the boy's collar and pulling him toward the bank. Carver appeared beside her, his strength tipping the balance, and together they hauled the kid onto dry ground. The boy coughed up water and gasped for air. Tessa checked his pulse, his breathing, the gash on his temple from a hoof strike. He'll live, she said. Carver crouched beside her, water streaming from his coat. That was a damn fool thing to do, Doctor. Current could have taken you both. She met his eyes, her own breathing still ragged. You'd have done the same. Yeah. But I'm paid to be a damn fool. You're not. Something shifted between them in that moment, a fractional easing of the distance he'd kept since the drive began. He stood and offered his hand. She took it, let him pull her to her feet, and felt the warmth of his palm through the cold river water. That night, after the herd settled and the camp quieted, Carver found her near the medical wagon. She was stitching a gash on another hand's arm by lantern light, her fingers steady despite the long day. He waited until she tied off the thread and sent the man away. Then, he sat on the wagon tongue, his hat in his hands. You didn't have to risk yourself today. Yes, I did. She cleaned her needle, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. That boy's 16. He's got family waiting for him in Cheyenne. I'm a doctor. Risking myself is part of the job. Carver turned his hat slowly, the brim worn smooth from years of handling. Your uncle said you were stubborn. Didn't mention you were brave. Stubborn and brave look the same from the outside. She glanced at him, caught the faint curve of his mouth. Why did my uncle really hire you? There are closer trail bosses, men who'd have charged less. Because I told him the truth about the railroad. They're not just buying land, they're forcing people out. Your uncle wanted someone who wouldn't sell him out if the railroad made a better offer halfway through. And you're that someone? I've got no love for men who use money as a weapon. Carver's voice went flat. I've seen what they do to people who can't fight back. She heard the edge of something personal in that. A wound he wasn't naming. She set the needle aside and turned to face him fully. What happened? He met her eyes, and for a moment she thought he might answer. Then he stood, settling his hat back on. Get some rest, Doctor. Tomorrow's a long day. He walked away before she could push, his figure disappearing into the shadows beyond the firelight. The drive pushed deeper into the high country, the days bleeding into each other in a rhythm of dust, heat, and the constant vigilance that kept 500 animals moving in the same direction. Tessa learned to sleep in the saddle, to read the weather by the smell of the wind, to trust her mare's instincts when the ground turned uncertain. And she learned Roscoe Carver. He was a man of routines and silence. Up before dawn, last to sleep, always positioned where the danger was thickest. He rarely smiled, but when he did it was genuine, a brief flash that changed his whole face. He was fair with the men, quick to praise good work, and quicker to step in when trouble brewed. And he never, ever talked about himself, which made her want to know him more. On the 10th night, she found him alone at the edge of camp, staring north toward the mountains they'd cross in another week. She approached slowly, giving him the chance to wave her off. He didn't. Can't sleep? She asked. Thinking. About? He glanced at her, then back at the horizon. About what happens when we reach Cheyenne. The railroad's got agents there. They'll know you're coming. They'll make another offer, probably bigger than before. Let them. I'm not selling. You say that now. But when they put the money on the table and remind you how much easier it would be to walk away, you might feel different. She stepped closer, close enough to see the firelight reflected in his eyes. You don't know me very well if you think I walk away from hard things. No. His voice went quieter. I guess I don't. The air between them felt heavy, charged with something neither of them had named yet. Tessa's pulse kicked, and she wondered if he could hear it. Why do you care whether I sell or not? It's your payment either way. Carver's jaw tightened. Because your uncle trusted me to see this through. And because, he paused, his gaze dropping to her face with an intensity that stole her breath. Because you deserve better than to be pushed out by men who think money makes them untouchable. The honesty in his voice hit her like a physical thing. She'd expected calculation, maybe a trace of self-interest. Instead, she got something raw and real, and it shook her down to the foundation. Before she could respond, a shout went up from the far side of the herd. Carver was moving instantly, his hand finding the rifle on his saddle in one smooth motion. Tessa followed, her heart hammering. 3 riders circled the herd's edge, their faces hidden by bandanas, their intentions clear. Rustlers, drawn by the size of the herd and the promise of easy money. Carver's voice cut through the night, cold and absolute. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Ride away now, or we settle this the hard way. The lead rider laughed, but there was no humor in it. We just want a few head. You got plenty to spare. You want cattle? Buy them honest. Otherwise, move on. The tension stretched, brittle as old glass. Tessa's hand found the pistol in her medical bag, a small revolver her uncle had insisted she carry. She'd never fired it at a person, but her hands didn't shake as she drew it. The rustlers saw the movement, saw Carver's men fanning out with rifles ready, and made their choice. They wheeled their horses and vanished into the darkness, their retreat marked by hoofbeats fading into the night. Carver lowered his rifle, but didn't relax. Double the watch tonight. They might come back. As the men moved to obey, he turned to Tessa. His gaze dropped to the pistol in her hand. You know how to use that? I know how. Whether I could actually shoot someone is a different question. Let's hope you never have to find out. He started to walk away, then stopped and looked back. But I'm glad you were ready. The next week tested them all. A freak storm rolled in from the west, driving rain and wind that scattered the herd and turned the trail into a mud-slicked nightmare. Tessa worked alongside the men, her dress plastered to her skin, her hands numb with cold as she helped round up strays and calm panicked cattle. Carver was everywhere, his voice cutting through the wind, his presence a steadying force that kept the chaos from turning into disaster. When a lightning strike spooked the herd into a stampede, he rode directly into the mass of churning bodies and turned the leaders, forcing the run into a wide circle that burned itself out. Tessa watched from the relative safety of higher ground, her heart in her throat, and realized with sudden clarity that she trusted him. Completely, irrevocably. And that terrified her more than the storm. When the storm finally broke and the herd settled, Carver found her in the medical wagon, changing into dry clothes behind a canvas partition. He waited outside until she emerged, her hair loose and drying, her spare dress simpler than the green one, but just as practical. Lost 3 head in the run, he said. Could have been worse. You saved the rest. We saved the rest. You kept the men from panicking. That's half the battle. She wrung water from her hair, her hands shaking now that the crisis had passed. I thought you were going to get trampled. Wouldn't be the first time I took a stupid risk. He stepped closer, and she realized he was shaking too, the adrenaline wearing off and leaving exhaustion in its wake. But I'd do it again. This herd's your future. I'm not letting it get scattered to hell because of bad weather. The words hit her sideways, the implication clear. He wasn't just protecting the cattle. He was protecting her. Roscoe. His name left her lips before she thought, and his eyes widened fractionally at the sound of it. Tessa. Her name in his voice was rougher, lower, and it sent heat through her despite the cold. They stood in the narrow space between the wagon and the night, close enough that she could see the water still beaded on his coat, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. Close enough that she could close the distance, if she chose. She almost did. Almost leaned forward and found out if his mouth was as warm as his eyes promised. But the fear stopped her. The memory of another man, another promise, another betrayal. Carver saw it. Saw her retreat, even though she didn't move. His expression shifted, something like disappointment crossing his features before he locked it away. Get some rest, Doctor. We've got hard ground ahead. He turned and walked into the darkness, and Tessa stood alone in the space he'd left, cursing herself for a coward. The high pass nearly broke them. The trail narrowed to a thread carved into the mountainside, sheer drops on one side and rock face on the other. The cattle balked, the men sweated, and every mile felt like 10. Tessa rode near the middle of the line, her mare picking each step with delicate care, and tried not to look down at the drop that seemed to stretch forever. Halfway through, a steer lost its footing. It went over the edge with a bellow that echoed off the rocks, and the sound sent a ripple of panic through the herd. Carver was there instantly, his voice sharp and commanding, turning the surge before it became a disaster. But the cost showed on his face when he rode back past her. They were losing time, losing animals, and the weight of it pressed down on him like a physical thing. That night, camped on a narrow plateau, Tessa found him alone again. His shoulders were rigid, his gaze locked on the distant horizon where Cheyenne waited, still a week away. "We're going to make it," she said. "Are we?" He didn't look at her. "I've lost 6 head. The men are exhausted. And we're still 2 days from the pass summit. If the weather turns again, we're finished. Then we don't let the weather turn." She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You've done everything right. The losses aren't your fault. Try telling that to your bank account." "I'm telling it to you." She waited until he looked at her. "I trust you, Roscoe. I didn't want to. I fought it every mile of this drive. But I do." His eyes searched hers, and she saw the conflict there. The want and the hesitation. The same fear she carried. Tessa. Her name again, rough as gravel. "You don't know me." "Not really." "Then tell me." He was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began. "I told you my last employer tried to cheat me. That was true. What I didn't say was that he had friends in the territorial court. When I took what I was owed, he had me arrested. Threw me in jail for 3 months on a theft charge that should have been laughed out of court." Tessa's breath caught. "What happened?" "I got out when his ledgers were audited, and the truth came clear. But by then I'd lost everything. My reputation, my savings, the woman I'd planned to marry." She didn't wait, didn't believe me, just left. The pain in his voice was old, but not healed. Tessa understood it, because she carried her own version of the same wound. "My fiancé left me the day before our wedding," she said quietly. "Took money from my medical practice accounts and disappeared. Left me with his debts and a ruined name. That's why I came west. I couldn't stay in St. Louis. Couldn't face the people who'd pitied me." Carver turned to look at her fully. "So we're both running, or both trying to stop running." She met his eyes. "This drive, it's not just about the money for me. It's about proving I can build something that lasts. Something that's mine." "Same." He reached out, slowly, and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered at her temple, warm and calloused. "I don't want to run anymore, Tessa. But I don't know how to stand still either. Maybe we figure it out together." The words hung between them, fragile and fierce. Then Carver leaned in and kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. His hand cupped her face. Her fingers found the front of his coat. And for a handful of heartbeats, the world narrowed to the warmth of his mouth and the solid reality of his presence. When they broke apart, both breathing hard. His forehead rested against hers. "This doesn't solve anything," he said. "No. But it's a start." They reached the summit 2 days later, the herd strung out along the high ridge, and started the descent toward the rolling plains that stretched to Cheyenne. The worst was behind them, but the tension didn't ease, because waiting at the base of the pass was a man on a fine horse, his suit too clean for the trail, his smile too wide. "Miss Bennett." The man tipped his hat. "My name's Howard Grimm. I represent the Territorial Railroad Company. I've been authorized to make you a very generous offer for Red Mesa Ranch." Carver's horse moved fractionally closer to hers, a silent wall of support. "I'm not selling," Tessa said. Grimm's smile didn't waver. "You might reconsider when you hear the price. Enough to pay off every debt your uncle left and set you up comfortably in any city you choose. You could go back east, resume your medical practice without the burden of cattle and drought and all the uncertainty that comes with frontier ranching." The offer was exactly what he'd promised. Generous. Tempting. Safe. Tessa felt Carver's gaze on her, but didn't look at him. "I said, I'm not selling." Grimm's expression hardened. "Miss Bennett, the railroad is coming through this territory whether you cooperate or not. We're offering you a fair price now. If you refuse, we'll find other ways to acquire what we need. Legal ways. Ways that might not be as pleasant for you." "That sounds like a threat," Carver said, his voice cold. "It's a reality, Mr. Carver." Grimm's gaze flicked to him, dismissive. "I'm told you're a man who understands the value of cutting your losses. Perhaps you could explain it to Miss Bennett. I understand plenty, including when a man's trying to steal what isn't his." Grimm's jaw tightened. "This conversation isn't over, Miss Bennett. We'll speak again in Cheyenne." He rode away, his posture stiff with barely contained anger. Tessa waited until Grimm was out of earshot. They're not going to give up. No. Carver's hands tightened on his reins. They'll push harder in Cheyenne. Might try to interfere with the sale. Might spread rumors about the herd's condition or your legal standing. Can they do that? They can try. But if we get the cattle to the railhead and you sign the transfer clean, there's not much they can do but complain. If. When. Carver met her eyes. We're 3 days out. We've come too far to quit now. That night, camped on the plains with Cheyenne's lights visible in the far distance, Tessa couldn't sleep. The enormity of what lay ahead pressed down on her. The sale. The railroad. The future she was trying to build on the shaky foundation of one successful drive. She rose and walked to the edge of camp, where Carver stood watch. He glanced at her but didn't speak, just moved slightly to make room beside him. They stood in silence, the night vast and quiet around them. I'm scared, she admitted finally. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's when you stop being scared that you make mistakes. Were you scared? During your trial? Terrified. Not of jail. Of losing myself. Of becoming the kind of man who stops believing there's a point to fighting. But you didn't. No. He turned to face her. Because I had something to prove. Same as you do now. She looked up at him, at the strong lines of his face, shadowed by starlight. What happens after Cheyenne? I don't know. His hand found hers, their fingers interlacing. But I'd like to find out. The kiss was slower this time, deeper, and when they broke apart, Tessa felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty, not safety, but the beginning of hope. They reached Cheyenne on a bright afternoon, the town sprawling and bustling with railroad construction and commerce. The railhead pens were massive, built to handle thousands of head, and the buyer Carver had contracted with was waiting. But so was Howard Grimm. Miss Bennett. Grimm stepped out of the buyer's office as they dismounted. I'm afraid there's been a complication. Tessa's stomach dropped. What kind of complication? It seems there's a question about the ownership of Red Mesa Ranch. A legal claim filed just this morning, asserting that your uncle's will is invalid due to an outstanding lien predating your inheritance. That's a lie, Tessa said flatly. The courts will determine that. In the meantime, the buyer has been advised to hold payment pending resolution of the ownership question. Carver stepped forward, his presence a wall of controlled fury. You can't stop a legal sale with a manufactured claim. I'm not stopping anything. I'm simply ensuring all parties are protected. Grimm's smile was a blade. If Miss Bennett can prove clear title, the sale proceeds. If not, well, the railroad is prepared to settle the claim and take possession of the ranch and the proceeds from this drive. Tessa's vision grayed at the edges. Everything she'd risked, everything she'd fought for, hanging on a legal trick she had no way to counter in time. Unless, she turned to Carver. The original deed. It's in my uncle's office safe. If I can get back to Bitter Ridge and retrieve it, I can prove the lien claim is false. That's 3 days hard riding, Carver said. The buyer won't hold the herd that long. Then I ride fast. She met his eyes. Can you keep the buyer from releasing the cattle to the railroad until I get back? Carver's jaw set. I can try. But Tessa, if you go alone, Grimm's people might intercept you. They know what you're after now. Then come with me and leave the herd. If I'm not here, Grimm could pressure the buyer into an early transfer. The choice hung between them, impossible and immediate. I'll go, Tessa said. You stay with the herd. It's the only way. The hell it is. Carver turned to one of his men, a grizzled veteran named Sutton. You're in charge until I get back. Don't let anyone touch those cattle. Buyer, railroad, or God himself. Understand? Sutton nodded grimly. Understood, boss. Carver turned back to Tessa. We leave now. We ride through the night. If we're lucky, we make Bitter Ridge by tomorrow evening. And if we're not lucky, then we fight. For every mile. They took the fastest horses and rode out of Cheyenne as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Behind them, Grimm watched from the buyer's office, his expression unreadable. The ride back was brutal. They pushed the horses to the edge of endurance, stopping only to water them, and switched to the spare mounts they'd brought. The land blurred past, familiar landmarks rendered strange by speed and moonlight. Halfway through the second night, Tessa's exhaustion threatened to pull her from the saddle. Carver saw her sway and called a brief halt, pulling her down and into his arms. 5 minutes, he said. That's all we can spare. She leaned against him, her body shaking with fatigue. This is insane. Yeah. His arms tightened around her. But it's our kind of insane. She laughed, the sound edged with hysteria, and he kissed the top of her head. We're going to make it, Tessa. I swear to you. They rode into Bitter Ridge as the sun climbed toward noon, the horses lathered and spent. Tessa slid from the saddle and ran for the ranch house, Carver close behind. The office safe was where she'd left it, the combination lock still set. She spun the dial with shaking hands, yanked the door open, and reached for the deed box. It was empty. No. The word left her lips as a whisper. No. 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 Carver was beside her instantly, his hands on her shoulders. Are you sure? It was here? I saw it. 2 weeks ago, when I first arrived. It was right here. Then someone took it. His voice went flat. Grimm must have sent people ahead. They knew we'd come for it. Tessa sank onto the desk, her vision swimming. It's over. Without the deed, I can't prove ownership. The railroad wins. Not yet. Carver crouched in front of her, his hands framing her face. Tessa, listen to me. The deed's not the only proof. Your uncle's lawyer, Holbrook, he has copies. Legal copies filed with the county. Holbrook's in town. But if Grimm got to the safe, he might have gotten to Holbrook too. Then we find out. They rode back into Bitter Ridge proper, their horses stumbling with exhaustion. The lawyer's office was dark, the door locked. Carver kicked it open, and they found Holbrook tied to a chair in the back room. Bruised, but alive. They took the deed. Holbrook gasped as Carver cut him free. And the county copies. Burned them, right in front of me. Said if I filed new ones, they'd make sure I never practiced law again. Tessa's knees buckled. Carver caught her, his arm iron strong around her waist. There's got to be another way, she whispered. Holbrook coughed, then straightened. There is. The Territorial Records Office in Laramie. They keep duplicate filings of all major property transfers. It's a 2-day ride, but if you can get there and retrieve the copy before the buyer releases the herd, you've got proof Grimm can't destroy. 2 days. Tessa looked at Carver. We don't have 2 days. The buyer won't wait that long. Then we make him wait. Carver's eyes were hard as flint. Sutton will hold the line. And we ride for Laramie now. On what horses? We've ridden ours into the ground. Holbrook stood shakily. Take mine. And the livery's got 2 fresh mounts. Tell them I sent you. Go. Go. The ride to Laramie was a fever dream of speed and determination. They traded horses twice, slept in the saddle, and spoke only when necessary. The land rolled past in shades of gold and shadow, and Tessa clung to the rhythm of the horse beneath her, and the certainty of Carver's presence beside her. On the second evening, with Laramie's lights visible ahead, he pulled his horse alongside hers. Whatever happens, he said, I need you to know something. She looked at him, her heart hammering. I'm done running. After this, win or lose, I'm staying. With you. If you'll have me, the words broke something open inside her. Yes. The answer left her lips without hesitation. Yes, Roscoe, I'll have you. They reached the territorial office just before closing, Tessa's legs barely holding her as she stumbled through the door. The clerk was packing up, his expression annoyed. I need a property filing copy, she said. Red Mesa Ranch. Bitter Ridge County. It's urgent. The clerk sighed. Come back tomorrow. Carver stepped forward, and something in his face made the clerk go still. She needs it now. 20 minutes later, they had the copy, the official seal stamped clear and incontrovertible. Tessa held it like a lifeline as they mounted fresh horses and turned back toward Cheyenne. The final ride back to Cheyenne took another full day and night. They arrived at the railhead just after dawn. The herd still penned, Sutton and the crew standing tense guard. Grimm was there, arguing with the buyer, his voice rising with frustration. Tessa dismounted and walked straight to them, the deed copy held high. "Here's your proof. Red Mesa Ranch belongs to me, free and clear. No liens, no claims. The sale proceeds now." Grimm's face went white, then red. "That's not possible. It's a legal duplicate from the territorial office." Tessa's voice was steady despite her exhaustion. "Signed and sealed. Your claim is void." The buyer took the document, examined it, and nodded. "This settles it. Miss Bennett, the sale is yours. Mr. Grimm, I suggest you take your grievance up with the courts if you feel wronged." Grimm's fury was a palpable thing, but he had no leverage left. He turned on his heel and stalked away, his defeat absolute. The buyer handed Tessa a bank draft, the numbers staggering. 500 head, delivered as contracted. Minus Mr. Carver's agreed fee, the balance is yours. Tessa took the draft, her hands shaking. She turned to Carver, and the look in his eyes made her throat tighten. "We did it," she said. "You did it." He stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "You fought for your future, and you won it clean. We won it." She reached for his hand, their fingers tangling. Together. Around them, the crew broke into ragged cheers. Sutton clapped Carver on the shoulder, and the buyer retreated to his office to finalize the paperwork. Carver pulled Tessa aside, into the narrow space between two pens, and kissed her, with all the pent-up fear and relief and want that had built over a month of trail and trouble. She kissed him back, her hands fisting in his coat, and felt the last of her walls crumble. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. "What now?" "Now we go home, to Red Mesa, and we build something that lasts. Together, she see more they're supposed to tree, what's us, supposed to round her. Like you mentioned in the story, where there are not her him, where their muff place where a lost whiles white, I'll let it tie end. Cone like granding attention tie in him. Without forgether, I call it quime, plucket or spose. Together. The train for Bitter Ridge left 2 hours later. Tessa and Carver stood on the platform, the crew already loaded into the cattle cars with the horses, the chaos of Cheyenne swirling around them. "I have to ask," Tessa said quietly. "Why didn't you take a better offer somewhere else? You could have walked away a dozen times during that drive." Carver smiled, the rare, genuine kind that changed his whole face. "Because your uncle told me something before he died. He said you were the stubborn kind, the kind who'd fight for what mattered. He said if I helped you win, I'd be helping myself find something worth staying for. And did you?" "Yeah." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I found you." The train whistle blew. They climbed aboard, found seats in the passenger car, and watched the frontier roll past as the miles carried them home. 3 months later, Red Mesa Ranch was thriving. The debts were paid, the fences repaired, and a new barn rose where the old one had rotted. Tessa's medical practice served half the county, and Carver's reputation as an honest trail boss brought steady work. And at night, in the ranch house that now felt like home, they sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the red mesas that gave the place its name. "You ever regret it?" Carver asked. "Choosing this over the easy money?" "Not once." Tessa leaned into his side, his arms solid around her shoulders. "This is real. It's ours. That's worth more than any railroad offer." "Agreed." He kissed the top of her head. "Though I wouldn't mind if the next drive was a little less dramatic." "Where's the fun in that?" He laughed, the sound warm and free, and pulled her closer. A month after that, on a clear autumn morning, they stood in the Bitter Ridge Church and married. The ceremony was simple, attended by the crew, Holbrook, and half the town who'd come to respect the doctor who'd saved their children, and the trail boss who'd proven his word was good. Sutton stood as Carver's best man. A young woman Tessa had treated for pneumonia stood as her witness. The preacher kept it short, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Carver kissed her with the whole town watching, and didn't care who saw. Afterward, at the reception in the town hall, Tessa found herself standing at the edge of the crowd, watching Carver laugh with the crew. He glanced up, caught her gaze, and crossed the room to her. "Regretting it yet?" he asked, echoing their old exchange. "Not even a little." She took his hand. "You? Best decision I ever made." He pulled her into a slow dance, the music a simple fiddle and guitar, the floor crowded with people who'd become friends and family. As they turned, Tessa caught sight of the open door and the land beyond. The red mesas glowed in the afternoon sun, vast and enduring. She'd come west running from a broken past, and found a future she'd never imagined. A home. A purpose. A man who'd fought beside her and chosen to stay. The dance ended, but Carver didn't let her go. He leaned down, his mouth close to her ear. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Carver?" The name sent a thrill through her. More than ready. They slipped out the back, left the celebration to carry on without them, and rode back to Red Mesa as the sun dipped low. The ranch waited, solid and real, a testament to everything they'd risked and won. That night, lying in bed with Carver's arm around her and the window open to let in the cool night air, Tessa felt the last pieces of fear and doubt fall away. She'd been running for so long, afraid to trust, afraid to hope. But here, in this place she'd fought to keep, and with this man who'd fought beside her, she'd finally found solid ground. "You awake?" Carver's voice was quiet in the darkness. "Yeah. Thinking about how far we've come. How different everything is. Better different?" She turned in his arms, found his face in the moonlight. "So much better. I love you, Roscoe Carver. I love you, Tessa Carver." He kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. "And I'm never letting you go." "Good. Because I'm not going anywhere." Outside, the wind whispered through the mesas. The cattle settled in the far pasture. The land stretched endless under the stars. And inside the ranch house, two people who'd both been running finally found the courage to stay. The years that followed brought challenges, droughts, and hard winters. Difficult births, both human and animal, that tested Tessa's medical skills. Market fluctuations that made every drive a gamble. But they faced it all together. Tessa and Carver, partners in every sense. The railroad eventually came through. But on terms the ranchers negotiated collectively, with Red Mesa leading the coalition. Grim moved on to easier prey. Bitter Ridge grew, and Tessa's practice with it. Carver built a reputation that brought contracts from across the territory. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the land glowed red and gold in the setting sun, they sat together on the porch and counted their blessings. 3 children, eventually. 2 boys and a girl, each as stubborn as their parents. A herd that grew year by year. A ranch that became a landmark, known for honest dealing and hard work. But more than any of that, they had each other. The trust they'd earned on a brutal cattle drive. The love they'd built in the spaces between danger and doubt. The promise they'd made and kept, through every storm and every sunrise. Tessa never regretted the inheritance that had brought her west. Never looked back at the life she'd left behind in St. Louis. Because here, on the red dirt of Red Mesa Ranch, beside a man who'd proven his word was gold and his heart was true, she'd found everything she'd never known she needed. And Carver, who'd spent years running from his past, finally had a reason to stand still. A home. A family. A woman who knew his worst and chose him anyway. On their 10th anniversary, they stood at the edge of the property and looked out over the land they'd fought to keep. The sun rose behind them, painting the mesas in shades of fire and promise. No regrets? Carver asked, the old question familiar as breathing. Tessa smiled and took his hand. Not a single one. You? Best trail I ever rode. He pulled her close, kissed her as the sun climbed higher. And the best is yet to come. She believed him. Because they'd proven, mile by hard mile, that together they could face anything the frontier threw at them. And win.